Now that we've created our project with the Vue CLI, we're ready to start customizing it and building our app. So in this lesson, we're going to take care of a bit of housekeeping, we're going to look at the app we're going to be building throughout this course, and then we're going to start building it using single file components. As we build the app throughout the rest of this course, I'm going to be referencing some concepts and syntax that I covered in the Intro to Vue 3 course, so if there's anything that seems a bit unfamiliar to you, you might want to check that out. While taking this course, I encourage you to code along so that you can learn by doing. To help with that, we had the starting and ending code in the GitHub repo for this course. To access the starting code, you'd head into the terminal and locate the project, then run git checkout L3-start. L3 refers to the lesson that we're on, lesson 3. When you open up that starting code, you'll see the project like so, and I want to bring your attention to this prettier RC file that I've created. As you can see, I've set up some rules so that prettier will change any double quotes to single quotes, and semicolons will be removed. This is a basic example of how you could set up some prettier configurations for your project. I'm not advocating for or against semicolons or single quotes. You can set this up however you like, or just ignore the file altogether. In order to start customizing this project and building our app, we've got to get a little bit more familiar with how it's working. If we take a look in this views directory, we see these two .vue files, home and about. If we check out the project running live in the browser, we'll see home and about right here. These are the two views that Vue Router is using for our site navigation. In the next lesson, we're going to cover Vue Router essentials, but for now, you just need to understand this. These files in our views directory, home and about, are what is loaded up and displayed by Vue Router, and whatever is nested within them is also displayed. For example, the home file has the hello world file nested within it, which contains all of this code that we're seeing. All of these components have the .vue extension, meaning they are single file Vue components. So that's what we're exploring in this lesson. What is a single file Vue component? How is it composed? And how do you use them? But just before we get into that, I want you to take a note of this H1 here. Welcome to your Vue.js app. You'll see why in just a minute. When looking at an app built in Vue, we're really looking at a collection of Vue components, traditionally built with single file Vue components. The anatomy of a single file component looks like this, with a template, script, and style section. You can think of the template as the skeleton of the component because it gives it its structure, and the script is the brain giving it its functionality and behavior. And the style section, well, it gives it its style. You can think of it like the clothes, makeup, hairstyle, etc. Often these sections are written in HTML, JavaScript, and CSS respectively, but you also have the freedom to use alternatives such as TypeScript, SCSS, etc. So now that we're starting to understand what single file components are and how they're built, let's move back to our application code. Remember earlier I mentioned how this home component has the hello world component imported and nested within it. And it's being fed this message prop, welcome to your Vue.js app. If we take a look inside the hello world component, we'll see that this H1 is displaying that message prop. So now we're seeing how a parent component can pass its child component some data that it can then display in its template. As we scroll down here, we see all of this template code, then the script section, and finally the style section. And note this comment here. It's informing us about the scoped attribute on the style section here. Taking a look at this concept deeper, the scoped attribute allows us to specify and isolate styles to our given component. In this example here, we're telling the component that any of its p tags are going to have a font size of 16 pixels. However, that style is not going to affect any other components in our application because it's scoped just to the component that we care about. Great, so we've covered what a single file component is and how the Vue CLI project was using them. Now we can start deleting out all that demo code to build our own app. What does that app look like? Let's take a look. By the end of this course, this is what we're going to build. It's a simple app that helps out the world one event at a time. As you can see, we're displaying a list of events, which we're pulling in through an API call. And when we click on an event, we can see the event details. Additionally, we can route to the About page. By now, you're probably ready to start building the app, so let's head back into the code and start building our first components. We'll use the hello world file as a starting point. we'll delete out all this template code in the div, then head down to the script section and change the name to event card, and comment out the prop. We'll get to this later. Finally, we'll delete out all the styles, along with a comment about the scope styles. Now we can rename the component here to event card. Why event card? Because this is going to be the little card that is displaying those events. Now that we've cleared out that code, we're ready to start adding some structure, brains, and style. We'll start off by changing this class name to event card and add some styles for the event card, including a hover effect. Inside the div here is where we'll display the event data, which means we're going to have to add event data to the component, which we'll do in the script section by adding the data method, which returns an object for our data. We'll add an event property, and I'm pasting in an event object. As you can see, it's got a bunch of properties such as an ID, title, date, time, etc. Now we can head back up into the template and add a span that shows when the event is happening. So we'll type the @, then use an expression which says event, referring to the event in our data, .time, then we'll say on and use another expression to print out event.date. Below here, we'll add an h4 with an expression that displays the event's title. In order for this event card to be displayed, we have to put it somewhere that can be routed to, such as the home file in our views directory. So inside of here, we'll import event card from the components directory. Then we'll need to register event card as a child component of our home component, which is its parent in this case. And now that it's imported and registered, we're able to use it in the template. Checking this out in the browser, when we're on the home route, we can see that it's working. Our event card is being displayed. We're definitely making great progress, but remember, we want these event cards to be showing up here in the middle, and we're going to want to be displaying multiple events eventually that we pull in from an API. So in order to get prepared for that, we need to do a little bit of refactoring. Our refactoring to-do list includes the following items. First, we'll want to move our events data to the parent, home.view in this case. The reason for this is because, as I mentioned, we're going to have a whole collection of events. So we want the parent to have that collection and to be creating a new event card for each event. Which leads us to the second to-do item, where we'll set up the parent to create our event card components based on that event data that it has, feeding each of those event cards its own event through a prop. And then finally, to make things look good, we're going to wrap all those event cards in a Flexbox container. To refactor our event card, I'm going to uncomment the prop here and set up an event prop, which will be an object. Remember, the parent is going to feed each event card its own event to display. Now we can delete out this event data. And that's it. Event card is ready. Now we'll head to the parent, home.view, and give it some data. In this case, an events array, which includes multiple event objects. Because we want to create an event card for each of these events, we'll v-for through the events. Each of these event cards is going to need its own key so that Vue can keep track of these. So we'll bind the key attribute to our event ID. And then finally, we'll add an event prop and pass in the event object that we're currently iterating over. So to review, each event card receives that event prop, and then it can display those event details. If we check this out in the browser, Now we see 3 event cards, so it's definitely working. Now we just need to display this all correctly and wrap these event cards in a Flexbox container. So heading back to home.view, we'll change the class name on this div to events, and head down here and add a scoped style section, and I'll paste in these styles, where we're creating a Flex container that is a center-aligned column. At this point, we've covered how to add styles that are scoped to the component itself, but what if we wanted to add a global style that were applied to the entire app? Where would we put that? A simple way to achieve this is to head into the app.view component, which is the parent component of our entire application. Here in its style section, we already have some global styles. So we could add another rule here. For example, if we wanted every H4 in our app to be a font size of 20 pixels, we could add that here. And because our event card has an H4 in its template, this style is going to be applied to that component and any other component that has an H4 within it throughout our app. While we're on the subject here of adding things globally to our application, if we scroll up, let's add an H1 here and see what happens. Looking at the app live, we see that H1, along with these H4s that are now a bit bigger. And when we navigate to the About route, we're still seeing that Events for Good heading. So if you needed to implement something like this where a heading or something else showed up no matter where you were within the app, it could go within the app.view file, like so. But for our use case, we don't necessarily need this to show up everywhere, so let's move that. We'll just cut it out of app.view and put it in the template of home.view. Finally, that brings us to the end of the lesson. We definitely covered a lot, so if you want to grab the ending code, just check out the L3-N branch, and I'll see you in the next lesson where we cover the essentials of View Router.